Hello everyone, I'm Crime Whispering. No, many of you like listening to these stories as you drift off to sleep, so before you doze off, let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying this case, don't forget to like and subscribe now. Let's get cozy, relax, and dive into tonight's story. When they say, blood is thicker than water, but when murder enters the picture, family bonds can become as twisted as the crime itself. For on August 7th, 39 years ago, a shocking tragedy struck a quiet countryside. Inside a secluded farmhouse, an entire family was found brutally murdered. Every member had been shot multiple times. No one survived except one Jeremy Bamber. The sole survivor claimed his sister, who struggled with severe mental illness, had gone on a violent rampage, killing their parents and even her own children before turning the gun on herself. There was reason to suspect her. She had a history of schizophrenia, had been hospitalized before, and once declared that her children were devil's offspring. She'd even expressed suicidal thoughts, but then came something unsettling at the funeral. Jeremy was seen cracking jokes, grinning, and making odd comments about finally being in charge. Was this just his strange way of coping, or was there something darker hiding behind that smile? And was his sister truly the killer, or was she an easy scapegoat? Let's uncover the truth behind the infamous White House Farm murders. The Bamber family had once been considered picture-perfect. June and Neville Bamber married in 1949 in a Christian church. Both were religious. Though June was deeply devout, her faith shaped nearly every part of her life. Neville was her opposite in many ways. Strong, grounded, outgoing, and well-liked by everyone in their village, he was seen as the backbone of the community. The kind of man who was both dependable and fun. He loved parties, while June preferred quiet evenings and prayer despite their differences. They balanced each other beautifully. There was just one problem. They couldn't have biological children, so they adopted two babies, a boy and a girl, and raised them as their own. They named them Sheila and Jeremy. At first, the family lived in a small house, but as the kids grew, they moved into a grand property that once belonged to June's father. A sprawling estate of over 300 acres, crowned by a red brick farmhouse with white trim. It looked like something out of a storybook, and soon became known locally as White House Farm. The Bambers were financially comfortable. They owned the farm, a flat in London, and a caravan business called OC Road Campsites. They were seen as a model family, wealthy, religious, and seemingly happy. Mid-roll sponsors section. Today's video is sponsored by Aura, and it's an important time to talk about them. Recent hackers reportedly stole the social security numbers of nearly every American. Over 29 billion records were taken from National Public Data, which sells personal info to employers, private investigators, and others doing background checks. These stolen records include full names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, and phone numbers, and hackers have allegedly leaked them online for free. You weren't protecting your personal information before. This should be a huge wake-up call. You've never been more vulnerable than right now, but I'm not too worried because I use Aura. Scans the dark web for my information, alerting me if my email, phone, or social security number shows up anywhere suspicious. They also notify me if anyone tries to use my data to open bank or credit accounts, and they back it all with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. They offer all of this and more in a single app. You can try it free for 14 days at Oracom. Into the deep. That's more than enough time to see if any of your data has been leaked. National public data won't help you, and they probably won't face any real consequences for this breach, so don't leave yourself or your family exposed. Visit Oracom Into the Deep to start your 2-week free trial. Now back to the story. June and Neville wanted the best for their children. They enrolled Sheila in private schools, ensuring she had a quality education. After finishing high school, she went to secretarial school to prepare for a steady career. something her parents felt would secure her future. Jeremy also went to private schools, but he was a handful from the start. He had behavioral issues, loved pulling dangerous pranks, and often clashed with his family. One of his favorite tricks was tormenting his mother's fear of rats. He would hide baby rats in his pocket and make her reach in, or he'd ride his bike in dizzying circles around her, just to watch her panic. His parents eventually sent him to boarding school, hoping it would straighten him out, but it only made things worse. He felt isolated and bullied, mocked for being adopted. The bullying was so relentless that whispers of possible abuse at the school began circulating. Still, Jeremy pushed through. He graduated, went to college, and returned home in 1982. His parents set him up comfortably. A charming cottage down the road from White House Farm, a new car, and even an 8% share in their caravan business. They expected him to work at the farm or the company, and from the outside, it looked like the Bamber family had it all. Two bright kids, a beautiful home, deep Christian values, a thriving business, but behind closed doors, not everything was perfect. June quietly battled depression in 1955, and again in 1958. She was hospitalized for her mental health at a time when mental illness was poorly understood and heavily stigmatized. She underwent electroshock therapy, where small electric currents were sent through her brain to trigger brief seizures. It was thought to reset the mind. Today, it's used only in severe cases and remains controversial. Interestingly, depression was partly fueled by her strained relationship with her children. She was deeply religious and viewed the world as a constant battle between good and evil. If someone didn't share her beliefs, she quickly assumed they were on the wrong side. This rigid mindset caused tension with both of her children, Sheila and Jeremy. June disapproved of Sheila's dream of becoming a model, while Jeremy secretly cultivated cannabis on the farm. Her strict values seemed to push them even further away. The conflict between June and Sheila grew especially bitter when Sheila became pregnant at just 17. June, fearing for the family's reputation, pressured her to have an abortion. Even though June was normally against it, Sheila went through with it, but she never forgave her mother. That moment created a rift between them that never fully healed. In an unexpected turn, Sheila eventually married the same man who had gotten her pregnant, a man named Colin. In May 1977, the two hoped for a fresh start and quickly tried for children. They soon welcomed twin boys, Daniel and Nicholas, but just 5 months after their birth, Sheila discovered that Colin had been cheating on her throughout their marriage. The betrayal devastated her. Their marriage collapsed, and Sheila sank into heartbreak and depression. By 1983, Sheila's mental health had deteriorated badly. She turned to Dr. Hugh Ferguson, the same psychiatrist who had once treated her. Mother Dr. Ferguson admitted her to a psychiatric hospital. At first, Sheila was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, but after further evaluation, the diagnosis was changed to paranoid schizophrenia. Her struggles eerily mirrored June's. Sheila started referring to her children as the devil's children and voiced terrifying thoughts about harming them. Convinced they were possessed, she even believed she could make them harm others. She claimed her children might seduce her and said she saw evil in both of them. Sheila fixated on Nicholas especially, saying he was becoming a woman hater and could turn into a killer. She described feeling trapped in a coven of evil and believed it all tied back to her mother's strict notions of good and evil. Dr. Ferguson described her state. When I first saw Sheila, she had been in acute psychosis for about 2 weeks. She'd been depressed and lacking confidence for 18 months. With growing sensitivity toward others, this slow decline built up to a sudden breakdown, suggesting a poor outlook. During her treatment at St. Andrew's Hospital, she spoke of bizarre delusions about demonic possession and sexual thoughts involving her twin sons. She was bewildered, but she never gave the impression of being violent or potentially violent. After about a month of treatment, Sheila was released in September 1983 and prescribed antipsychotic medication. She continued seeing Dr. Ferguson, but later suffered another psychotic episode, which led to her children being removed from her care and placed with their father 2 years later. On August 4th, 1985, Sheila brought her sons to White House Farm to visit her parents and her brother Jeremy. The twins were excited to see their grandparents, and Sheila seemed eager to reconnect, despite lingering tension with June on August 6th. Just 2 days later, the family had dinner together. Neville, June, Sheila, the twins, and Jeremy during the meal. Neville and June suggested that Sheila considered putting the boys into daytime foster care, though it's unclear if they meant actual foster care or just daycare. Sheila was offended and uncomfortable at the idea, as if they were questioning her ability to raise her own children after dinner. Around 9:30 p.m., Jeremy left and drove back to his cottage nearby. Around that same time, the farm secretary, Barbara, called Neville about work, but noticed something strange. He sounded distracted and agitated, and she could hear what seemed like arguing in the background. He abruptly hung up on her, which was completely out of character for the usually polite and composed Neville. Roughly 30 minutes later, June's sister Pamela phoned the house during the call. Sheila briefly spoke with her, but Pamela sensed that Sheila was behaving oddly then. In the early hours of August 7th, around 3:30 a.m., Jeremy claimed he received a frantic call from his father. According to Jeremy, Neville said that Sheila had gone crazy and was armed with a gun. The call cut off suddenly. Instead of dialing emergency services right away, Jeremy chose to call the police using the non-emergency line on my father phone from White House Farm. Jeremy told them, and he sounded really frightened. He says, "My sister's gone crazy, and she's got a gun." The police told Jeremy to head over to the farm and said they would meet him there, but as they drove behind him, the officers noticed something strange. Jeremy was driving unusually slowly, which didn't match the urgency of the situation after all. According to the call they'd received, his father had said Sheila had gone wild with a gun. By around 5 a.m., everyone finally arrived at White House Farm, yet, instead of entering immediately, the police decided to wait outside for nearly 2 hours. They even used a megaphone to call into the house, repeatedly asking if anyone was inside, but got no response, only the sound of a dog barking from somewhere within the house. This long delay was unusual and never clearly explained. During this time, Jeremy spoke with the officers outside. He told them about the family dinner 2 nights earlier, the phone call from his dad, and how Sheila had seemed upset over the suggestion that her boys go into foster care. He also mentioned her history of mental illness. Then, at the last minute, Jeremy added that he had left his own rifle at his parents' house, fully loaded, sitting out on the counter. This new detail concerned the officers, the combination of an already tense family dynamic, a loaded weapon in the house, and Sheila's fragile mental state painted a potentially dangerous picture. Finally, at 7:54 a.m., police entered the farmhouse. What they found inside was horrifying. Upstairs were the bodies of June, Sheila, and the twin boys, Daniel and Nicholas. Downstairs in the kitchen, they found Neville slumped over in his pajamas. He had been shot 8 times, 6 bullets to the face alone. There were defensive wounds across his body, showing he had fought desperately for his life. June had been shot 7 times, Sheila had 3 gunshot wounds, Daniel had 5, and Nicholas 3. The twins were found in their beds. The scene was soaked in blood, and the phone was left off the hook when Jeremy was informed. He reportedly broke down completely, hysterical, screaming, sobbing, even vomiting. The police quickly formed a theory. Sheila, suffering from her mental illness, had killed her family and then taken her own life. The media echoed this version of events, painting Sheila as the unstable killer, but almost immediately, aspects of the scene didn't sit right. Sheila had been shot 3 times, something extremely uncommon in suicides. The rifle was found resting on her, pointed toward her face. The medical examiner stated that, while it is technically possible to fire multiple shots and still remain conscious long enough to pull the trigger again, it would be unusual. On top of that, The handling of the crime scene was shockingly poor. Investigators burned the blood-soaked bedding and carpet, destroying potential evidence. A detective even picked up the gun with bare hands, contaminating any possible fingerprints or DNA in Sheila's room. A carving on the wall read, "I hate it here," but no one determined when it had been made, that day, or much earlier regardless. Authorities quickly settled on the idea that Sheila was the culprit. Just 3 days after the murders, Jeremy inherited White House Farm and the family businesses with his strict, religious parents gone. He was now free to live as he pleased, including continuing his secret cannabis growing operation at the family funeral. Jeremy's behavior drew suspicion rather than appearing quietly grief-stricken. He was extremely dramatic, wailing, screaming, collapsing to the floor, but people noticed odd shifts. As soon as the service ended and he thought no one was looking, relatives caught him grinning during the wake. He spoke disturbingly casually about how he was now the boss and discussed future plans with his girlfriend, Julie, as though nothing had happened. Media footage showed him crying uncontrollably, even needing help to stand up, yet when the cameras turned off, he instantly returned to a calm, almost cheerful state. Meanwhile, the rifle from the scene was tested for fingerprints. Both Sheila's and Jeremy's prints were found on it. Jeremy explained this by saying it was his gun, and that he had handled it earlier that day to go rabbit hunting, though he never actually went soon after. One of Jeremy's cousins discovered a gun silencer hidden in a cupboard in the family office. This was a critical find, because if Sheila had used the silencer, she would not have been physically able to shoot herself in the way the scene showed with the silencer attached. The rifle would have been too long and unwieldy for her to maneuver under her own chin. Even more suspicious, the silencer had a small sticky spot of blood on it. Forensic tests confirmed it wasn't Jeremy's, but could belong to any of the victims. This suggested the silencer was likely used during the murders, meaning Sheila could not have returned it neatly to the cupboard afterward if she had then shot herself. This detail became one of the prosecution's most powerful points later on. There was also something unsettling about Jeremy's behavior on the day of the murders. Julie, his girlfriend since 1983, received a call from him in which he said something was wrong, but gave no details, and then abruptly hung up. Hours later, she learned about the murders within a month. Their relationship began to unravel. Julie grew increasingly suspicious of Jeremy, questioning his stories and pointing out inconsistencies. Their arguments became intense, even violent. In one fight, Julie allegedly tried to smother him with a pillow. Then she discovered Jeremy had been cheating on her. Furious, she attacked him, and afterwards went straight to the police. Julie told them she believed Jeremy might have been involved in the Bamber family murders. She revealed disturbing things about his past, including a previous scheme where he staged a break-in at his family's business to steal money, which he had once bragged about as being forgery. Also revealed that Jeremy often complained about his family, saying they were too controlling and overly critical of his choices. He allegedly believed Sheila was a bad mother, and that her children would grow up troubled. Julie suspected that Jeremy's motive was pure greed, even though his family had already given him substantial financial support. He wanted more, according to Julie. Jeremy was upset that his parents had recently updated their will to split their estate equally between him and Sheila. Jeremy wanted the entire inheritance for himself, and allegedly planned to kill his entire family, so no one else could claim it. Julie claimed that Jeremy even discussed different ways of carrying out the murders, such as burning the house down, slipping sleeping pills into their food, or simply shooting them. He reportedly thought it would be easy to blame Sheila because of her schizophrenia, casting himself as the grieving victim. Julie recounted one chilling moment when Jeremy called her after a family dinner, furious, and said, "It's tonight, or never." Then, at around 3 a.m. on the night of the murders, he allegedly called again and said, "Everything's going well. Something's gone wrong at the farm. Love you. Talk to you later." When they were later outside the house, Julie said she quietly questioned Jeremy about his role, and he whispered, "I should have been an actor." She also alleged that Jeremy at one point claimed he had hired the family plumber to carry out the killings, though this was quickly proven false, because the plumber had a solid alibi despite Jeremy's attempts to present an alibi. It quickly unraveled. Police arrested him, but he managed to bail himself out and fled to Amsterdam there. He began selling off his family's possessions, and even tried to sell nude photos of his sister to a tabloid. But when he returned to town on September 29, he was immediately rearrested. Jeremy's trial began on October 3, 1986. The prosecution argued that Jeremy had orchestrated the murders and framed Sheila. They pointed to Neville's defensive wounds as evidence he had fought someone stronger than Sheila. Likely Jeremy, the defense, meanwhile, tried to blame Sheila by highlighting her mental health struggles, but the evidence against Jeremy was overwhelming. After just 9 hours of deliberation, the jury found him guilty on all counts, sentencing him to 5 life terms without parole. Still, debate lingers even today. Some insist Sheila was responsible, while others suspect Julie fabricated her testimony to get revenge on Jeremy. Through it all, Jeremy continues to proclaim his innocence because of his conviction. His parents' estate was passed to his cousins. One cousin moved into White House Farm, and together with others, they took ownership of the caravan site and various other family properties. Jeremy claimed his family had framed him, but one cousin dismissed this as absolute rubbish. In 2010 story, 2 across Australia, people were left shocked and heartbroken by a tragedy that unfolded on a suburban street in Queensland. Hannah Clark seemed to have a perfect life, a loving family, 3 beautiful children, and a passion for fitness, but behind closed doors, she was living a nightmare. In February 2020, Hannah and her children's lives were stolen by the man who was supposed to protect them. You can't comprehend it. That's the heartbreaking part. We just keep asking, why? Who could do that to their kids? To take their laughter, their games, their future, despite recently assaulting his estranged wife and breaching a domestic violence order. 42-year-old Rowan Baxter was not arrested. Police simply gave him a court date and allowed him to walk free, saying they wouldn't object to bail. Less than 3 weeks later, he murdered Hannah and their 3 children. Hannah Clark was born on September 8, 1988, in Brisbane, Australia, to Sue and Lloyd Clark. She had a younger brother, Nathaniel, nicknamed Nat, whom she adored. Even though they were only a couple of years apart, Hannah took on a protective, motherly role toward him. Hannah was vibrant, full of energy, and loved being the center of attention. She played sports throughout school and even became school captain in college. During college, she discovered a passion for CrossFit and often spent hours at the gym. It was there, in 2008, that she met Rowan Baxter. Rowan had just moved from New Zealand to Australia with his wife and young son at the time. Hannah was 20 and Rowan was 31. They met during a boxing class, and it didn't take long for Hannah to fall for him. She told her parents about Rowan, but they weren't thrilled. Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, never trusted him. Something about him felt off. She found him smug and arrogant, and the 11-year age gap worried her. Rowan wasn't known for being particularly intelligent. He couldn't remember his 4-digit bank PIN and failed to register his car simply because no one told him he needed to. He was obsessed with his physical appearance, using steroids to build his large muscles. Unlike Hannah, who built a successful career as a personal trainer and was beloved by her clients, Rowan struggled to retain clients. His short temper, often worsened by steroid use, drove people away, and he frequently bounced between gyms. No gym wanted a trainer who made clients uncomfortable or insulted them on social media, which Rowan regularly did, especially targeting female clients at first. Hannah's parents tried to give him a chance for her sake. They didn't want to push her away, so they gave him the benefit of the doubt. Over time, they tried to warm up to him and were eventually relieved when they thought things might be improving for a while. Hannah's parents thought things were finally settling down. Rowan had promised them he would leave his estranged wife, who he was still living with despite their separation though. Sue and Lloyd were uneasy about that arrangement. Rowan kept insisting it was only temporary and that he was staying for the sake of his child eventually. He did end things with her completely, which brought Hannah's parents a sense of relief, it seemed, at least briefly. Like he was finally keeping his word. Not long after, Rowan proposed, and he and Hannah married in October 2012 in Kingscliff, New South Wales, Australia. Hannah's parents described it as the happiest day of her life. Hannah herself said she felt like a princess at the time. She was 14 weeks pregnant with their first child, Olia, who was born on April 10, 2013. Their second daughter, Leona, was born on March 19, 2015, and their youngest, Trey, arrived on December 4, 2016. Aaliyah was a bright, sharp, and spirited girl who seemed destined to achieve big things. Leona was cheeky, kind, and full of empathy, and Trey, the youngest, was the golden child, completely adored by his mother, even as a toddler. He was already showing a love for sports while Hannah devoted herself to raising their children. Rowan struggled due to his difficult personality and lack of social skills. He couldn't hold down work or earn enough to support the family. Hannah became the main breadwinner, and when the couple decided to open a gym, they didn't have the funds to start it alone. Sue and Lloyd stepped in to help finance it, wanting to support their daughter's dreams. At the time, both Hannah and Rowan were also working at a sports shoe retailer, something Rowan pushed for so he could monitor where she was at all times at work. He behaved just as he had at the gyms, belittling female employees and asserting his supposed superiority. One day, during a training session with Sue, Rowan intentionally dropped her on her head, slamming her into the floor and causing her to bleed instead of helping. He mocked her and laughed despite this and their growing concerns. Hannah's parents continued trying to accept him for Hannah's sake in the early days. The relationship seemed fine, but once the children came, things changed rapidly. Rowan became more erratic and controlling. He treated Sue poorly from the start, and his hostility extended to Lloyd as well. He seemed jealous of Hannah's closeness with her family and wanted her isolated from anyone who might challenge his behavior. Over time, Hannah's family noticed troubling changes in her. She became withdrawn and hyper-focused on her appearance, constantly worried she was fat. Rowan had planted this fear in her by repeatedly calling her a pig and criticizing her body. Especially after childbirth, Rowan seemed to enjoy pushing people past their breaking points at the gym. He drove clients so hard that many became physically sick. His expectations for Hannah were impossibly contradictory. She had to be attractive enough to meet his standards, but not so attractive that other men would notice her financially. Things were also unraveling. The couple opened their gym in 2015, but after 3 years they had to relocate because of ongoing struggles. Sue and Lloyd even remortgaged their house to cover the bills, but Rowan's reckless spending only made things worse. Hannah secretly opened a bank account to pay essential bills, trying to shield their finances from Rowan's carelessness. Sue said Hannah had started thinking about leaving Rowan shortly after Leona was born, but when she became pregnant with Trey, she felt trapped. She knew Rowan would fight to keep his son, and the thought of a custody battle terrified her, despite her doubts. Sue and Lloyd began preparing their home so Hannah and the children would have a safe place to go if she ever left. Hannah's passion for CrossFit became one of her few escapes. She competed with a team from her gym, including her close friend Dave Kramer. In 2019, her team qualified for a major competition, and Hannah was overjoyed. Rowan, however, didn't qualify for the solo event and tried to force his way onto her team, even though nobody wanted him. Hannah quietly apologized to a teammate about Rowan's behavior, but her daughter Aaliyah accidentally recorded the conversation. When Rowan found out, he exploded in anger and accused Hannah of disrespecting him. He withdrew from the competition, assuming that without him the team would fail, but they found a replacement and competed anyway. On the day of the competition, when Hannah returned home from the gym, Rowan and the children were gone. He didn't leave a note or message. He finally called her around lunchtime, blaming her for the situation and saying he would return the children when he felt like it. He also revealed that he had been listening to her calls. Furious that she had spoken to her mom and brother Sue, encouraged Hannah to go ahead with the competition anyway, warning her that giving in would only empower Rowan further, despite the fear and chaos. Hannah was determined not to let his manipulation control her any longer. She confided in a few trusted friends and admitted she was scared. Ashley's murder had shocked everyone who knew her. She was young, vibrant, and full of life. And the sudden brutality of her death left friends and family reeling. Detectives at first struggled to find any solid leads. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested she had willingly opened the door to her killer. That pointed investigators toward someone she knew, or someone who could have easily passed as familiar. Michael's name eventually surfaced, mostly due to his strange behavior around Ashley in the months leading up to her death. Friends described how he seemed infatuated with her, often showing up uninvited and lurking near her home. He'd once offered to fix something in her apartment just to get inside. At the time, it seemed awkward, but not threatening. After the murder, those same incidents took on a much darker meaning. As detectives dug deeper, they realized Michael had also been linked, however loosely, to other women who had suffered violent attacks. One of those women was Maria Bruno, who had been brutally murdered in her own home in 2005. Like Ashley, Maria was young and beautiful, and her killing was marked by disturbing levels of overkill and mutilation. This connection caught investigators' attention. It was unusual for someone to be even tangentially associated with more than one violent crime scene, unless there was something more sinister beneath the surface. Still, they had little physical evidence tying Michael to any of these murders, and for a long time, the cases remained unsolved and stagnant. But then, in 2008, everything changed. Michael was arrested in connection to a series of brutal attacks on other women who had survived. These women were able to describe their attacker, and their accounts painted a chillingly similar picture. A man who charmed his way into their homes before turning violently on them. When police searched Michael's car and apartment, they found items that didn't belong to him. Personal belongings like earrings, hair ties, and photographs. It seemed like he had been keeping trophies from his victims. That discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Even more damning was the DNA evidence. Advances in forensic testing allowed authorities to re-examine old samples from Ashley's crime scene, and when they did, they found a match. Michael's DNA was present. It was the break they had been waiting for, proof that he had been inside Ashley's home the night she died. This revelation finally tied Michael directly to Ashley's murder, and it cracked open the other cold cases as well. Rowan had always known how to manipulate Hannah's deepest fears. She worried that if she ever stood up to him or filed for divorce, he might use their children as leverage. Though Hannah believed he wouldn't physically harm them, she was terrified he might take them away or turn them against her. Up until that point, Rowan had never physically attacked her, so Hannah convinced herself he wouldn't harm the kids. Either her abuse had been emotional, financial, and sexual, but never physical, so she didn't fully recognize it as domestic abuse. That changed later that year. One evening, after returning home from a jiu-jitsu class full of adrenaline, Rowan suddenly tripped Hannah to the floor, leaned over her, and grabbed her throat with force. He threatened her, chillingly saying, "You have no idea what I'm capable of." It was the first time he had crossed into physical violence, and it became a breaking point for Hannah. Despite all she had endured, Hannah had always been a strong, independent woman at heart. She decided to seek help. Speaking with a police officer, Hannah finally shared the reality of her life with Rowan. The officer told her that being coerced into daily sexual intercourse was considered sexual assault. This revelation was a turning point. It validated her pain and made her realize she was a victim of domestic abuse. The officer also explained the legal concept of coercive control, helping Hannah understand that Rowan's behavior fit the definition of domestic violence. Empowered by this clarity, Hannah packed only the bare necessities for herself and her children and fled to her parents' home in Camp Hill by November 2019. Though the relationship was over, their marriage had not yet been legally dissolved. Hoping to maintain some stability for the children, Hannah allowed Rowan to see them informally around the same time. Rowan began confiding in his church pastor. The pastor later described Rowan as having an alpha male complex and controlling tendencies. Rowan sometimes admitted he was in the wrong and needed to change, but he didn't know how. The pastor even observed Rowan at the gym and was shocked by how aggressively he treated his clients. Some pushed so hard they vomited during training though. The pastor tried to offer Hannah support. She made her position clear. She told co-workers she feared Rowan might one day kill her despite her fear. She hadn't yet filed a formal complaint or sought further protection then. On Boxing Day, Rowan's obsession escalated while Hannah walked with her children. He suddenly appeared and forcibly took their daughter, Leona, for 2 terrifying days. Hannah didn't know where her daughter was. Police eventually found Leona safe with Rowan, who hadn't harmed her, but had caused Hannah immense distress. Police urged Hannah to file a formal complaint and seek a restraining order, which she did. Still, Rowan was granted joint custody, giving him continued access to her and the children. The harassment grew worse after returning the children one day. Rowan plastered photos of Hannah in her underwear around his car for the kids to see when Hannah tried to take them down. He grabbed her arm hard enough to sprain her wrist and struck her in the face, splitting her lip. Hannah's mother, Sue, witnessed the assault and rushed to help, while Rowan fled. Then came the morning of February 19, 2020. Hannah was getting ready to drop her 3 children at school when Rowan ignored the restraining orders and forced his way into the passenger seat of her Kia Sportage. Despite her desperate pleas, he refused to get out. As they drove, Hannah spotted a man named Michael Zemek washing his car and pulled over, hoping for help. What followed was unthinkable. Rowan began dousing Hannah and the children with gasoline. Michael heard Hannah's frantic cries for help, while Rowan remained cold and detached. Moments later, Rowan lit the gasoline. Flames engulfed the car. Hannah, her body on fire, managed to escape and screamed for her children still trapped inside. An off-duty paramedic stopped to help as Michael tried to extinguish the flames with his garden hose, burning his own hands and face in the process. But the heat was too intense to reach the children. Hannah suffered burns to 97% of her body only. The soles of her feet were untouched, despite her catastrophic injuries. Her only concern was her children. When police arrived, Hannah was nearly unrecognizable. Yet she clearly identified Rowan Baxter as her attacker, reminded officers there was a protection order against him, and described what had happened. When asked if Rowan had ever been threatening before, Hannah softly replied, "Not to me." No, even as her life faded, she still struggled to see what she had endured as a boozer, haunting testament to how deeply the control had taken root. Meanwhile, Rowan, with severe burns, over 80% of his body, made no effort to help his children. Instead, he armed himself with a knife, threatened bystanders who tried to help, and ultimately stabbed himself in the chest, taking his own life. After the tragedy, an inquest was launched to understand what went wrong and how to prevent something like this from ever happening again. Friends, family, and others who knew Rowan and Hannah came forward to share their experiences. One of Hannah's closest friends, who had previously tried to warn the police, expressed deep frustration that her concerns were dismissed and no meaningful action was taken. Hannah's mother, Sue, also spoke, describing the way Rowan had mistreated Hannah and even physically assaulted her. The pastor who had once tried to help Rowan testified as well, saying he believed Rowan felt no genuine remorse for his controlling behavior. Investigators also revealed a disturbing note found written by Rowan Baxter on January 26, 2020. In it, Rowan painted himself as the victim, blaming Hannah for destroying his life and threatening to hurt her emotionally by taking their children away. This note provided a chilling glimpse into his mindset and revealed how he saw himself as the one who had been wronged. It also hinted that he may have been planning to abduct the children as a form of punishment toward Hannah. Just weeks before the horrific events of February 19th, Hannah confided in Nicole about her escalating fears for her safety. Alarmed by Hannah's distress and Rowan's increasingly erratic behavior, Nicole went to the police herself to express her concern. She warned them that she believed Hannah and her children were in imminent danger despite her detailed account. Police said there was nothing they could do without evidence of a physical threat or an actual crime being committed. On March 9, 2020, Hannah and her 3 children were laid to rest together at the funeral. Her loved ones vowed to be strong for one another despite the unbearable loss in response to this tragedy. Hannah's family created the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation in March 2020, aiming to combat domestic and family violence in Australia, so no one else would have to endure what Hannah and her children did. A few days later, on February 23rd, over 1,000 people gathered at the Bill Hewitt Reserve in Camp Hill for a public vigil to mourn Hannah, Olia, Liana, and Trey to honor their memory. A section of the reserve was renamed Hannah's Place, marked with a sign, a shelter, and newly planted trees. This memorial was officially opened on September 8, 2020, the day that would have been Hannah's 32nd birthday. Story 3. Yes, I was wondering if I could have a police officer come to an office building. We have somebody in our building who will not leave, and he's not an employee. Have you asked him to leave yet? Yeah? We have. I will not stop until I find my family, or until it's my last day on this earth. How could a man kill not just his wife but also his 2 young stepchildren? That's the question at the heart of the case of Luis Toledo, a man whose jealousy and violent impulses led to the brutal killing and mysterious disappearance of his entire family. Even 10 years later, the case remains clouded in questions. Did Luis Toledo, a former gang member, really murder all of them that day? And how did his obsession with his 21-year-old neighbor, Tyon Jackson, play into the tragedy? Today, we'll explore the haunting case of Luis Toledo and try to piece together the strange, devastating events that unfolded. Before we dive in, a quick word from today's sponsor. Or hackers may have stolen the social security numbers of nearly every American. Over 29 billion records were leaked from national public data, records that include full names, addresses, dates of birth, social security numbers, phone numbers, and even alternate names. And this stolen data has reportedly been released online for free. You weren't already taking steps to protect your personal information? Now's the time. That's why I use Aura. They monitor the dark web for my personal data and alert me if anything is found. They even provide up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, plus a range of features to keep me safe online. You can try Aura for 14 days free at Auracom Into the Deep. It's fast, simple, and could save you from identity theft now. Let's get back to the story. 28-year-old Yenia Suarez seemed like an ordinary, happy woman. She lived in Deltona, Florida, raising her 2 kids, minus 9-year-old Talia and 8-year-old Michael, largely on her own, since their father had left their lives. The exact reason he left is unclear, but it left a gap she did her best to fill. According to her mother, Felicida Neves, Yenia loved being a mom. Her kids were energetic, joyful, and her whole world. Then, a few years before her death, Yenia met Luis Toledo, and everything began to change. They met by chance at a festival, where Yenia was suddenly attacked by a man. Toledo stepped in immediately, fought off the attacker, and carried Yenia to the hospital to make sure she was safe. To Yenia, who longed for a protector, Toledo seemed like a hero. He was strong, charismatic, and fiercely protective. People even nicknamed him Simi, because they said his punches hit like a semi-truck. But Yenia had no idea about the darkness in his past. Later, Reports revealed that Toledo had once been the third highest member of the Latin Kings, a notorious street gang involved in drug trafficking and homicides. He had even testified in court against his former gang by the time Yenia met him. Toledo seemed to have left that world behind gradually. She trusted him enough to let him move in. He stepped into the role of stepfather to Talia and Michael, and for a while, Yenia believed she had finally found the loving, protective partner she had been searching for. Michael Gargiulo's trial became one of the most widely covered in Los Angeles by the time it began. Prosecutors had painted him as a calculating, remorseless predator who stalked women for months before attacking. The media gave him chilling nicknames like the Hollywood Ripper and the Killer, emphasizing the cold-blooded nature of his crimes in court. The prosecution methodically walked the jury through the timeline of his murders and attempted murders. They began with Ashley Ellerin in 2001, describing how she had been stabbed 47 times, many of the wounds so forceful they went all the way through her body. Then they presented the 2005 murder of Maria Bruno, who had been killed while she slept in her apartment. Michael had cut the window screen to get inside and left behind a telltale clue, a bloody booty, a surgical shoe covering found at the scene, which contained his DNA. The prosecutors also brought up his 2008 attack on Michelle Murphy, the woman who had survived. Michelle bravely took the stand and told the jury how Michael had surprised her in her own bedroom and began stabbing her, but she managed to fight him off during the struggle. He cut himself and left a trail of his blood at the scene. That blood became the crucial link that led police to him. Once detectives had his DNA, they were able to cross-match it to both Ashley's and Maria's crime scenes, confirming what they had long suspected, that he had been killing for years. The defense, meanwhile, tried to cast doubt on the evidence. They claimed the DNA could have been transferred accidentally and suggested other possible suspects, but their arguments fell flat. The sheer weight of the evidence, combined with the emotional testimony from Michelle and the families of the victims, made it nearly impossible to believe Michael was innocent. In 2019, after weeks of deliberation, the jury found Michael Gargiulo guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, Ashley Ellerin and Maria Bruno, and 1 count of attempted murder, Michelle Murphy. The judge called him a stone-cold serial killer before sentencing him to death. Even after the verdict, Michael showed little emotion. He has continued to maintain his innocence, though the evidence against him is overwhelming. He has since been transferred to death row at San Quentin State Prison, while awaiting the outcome of his appeals. Things initially seemed like they were finally looking up. The couple got married, and Toledo, whose real name was Louis, enrolled in barber college to build a career for himself. Yenia even said he was the best thing that had ever happened to her, but that picture of domestic bliss shattered quickly. While Toledo played the role of a protective husband well enough, he showed far less interest in being a responsible provider, while Yenia worked full-time at American Canine Solutions. Toledo spent most of his days playing video games, going to the gym, and generally doing whatever he pleased. His favorite pastime seemed to be hanging out with his neighbor and fellow barber student, 21-year-old Tayshaun Jackson. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Tayshaun had a history of shady, or possibly criminal behavior, though no one knew exactly what he'd been involved in. How close Toledo and Tayshaun really were is unclear. Were they simply friends, or was there something darker going on between them? No one can say for sure, but this relationship would soon play a central role in the tragedy to come. In Yenia grew increasingly frustrated with her husband's lack of discipline. They often fought about how much time he spent gaming and about his constant visits to Tayshaun. And beneath the surface, another tension was brewing. By mid-2013, Toledo had convinced himself that Yenia was having an affair with her married co-worker, Kevin Dredden. He had always been possessive, and this suspicion sent him spiraling. On October 13, 2013, Yenia left on a business trip with Kevin. During the trip, Toledo called and texted her obsessively, accusing her yet again of sleeping with him. In accusation, Yenia firmly denied. She told Toledo he wasn't thinking straight and reassured him nothing was happening. But he refused to believe her in one message. Toledo asked her who had her attention, if not Kevin, implying she had been neglecting him. The irony that he spent more time with Taishan than helping raise Yenia's children never seemed to cross his mind. Arguments dragged on for 3 days. When Yunia came home from the trip on October 16th, she had reached her breaking point. She told Toledo she wanted a divorce. Surprisingly, he seemed calm, asking her to let him stay just 3 more months to save money before moving out. Yunia agreed, unaware she had just signed her own death warrant soon after. Toledo secretly bugged her phone. That's how he discovered an intimate text exchange between her and Kevin, discussing plans to hook up in the future. This sent him into a rage. He jumped into his car and sped to Yenia's office. On the way, she frantically texted him, begging him not to do anything reckless. She said her messages with Kevin had been a mistake. But Toledo wasn't listening. At around 1 p.m., a 911 call came from the office, reporting a man refusing to leave. Toledo stormed in, screaming at Yenia and Kevin, claiming he had proof of their affair. The 911 recording captured Yenia crying and apologizing while Toledo shouted. Witnesses saw him slap her so hard she fell to the floor. Toledo fled just as police were arriving later that day. He and Yenia met at her friend Felicita's house to talk things through. They decided to try again and went home together around 7:45 p.m. That would be the last time anyone saw Yenia Suarez alive. One knows exactly what unfolded over the next 12 hours. We only have Toledo's account and police findings to piece together what happened. Toledo claimed that, around 3 a.m., he ran into Taishan outside. They supposedly went inside to play video games. But when Yenia came out and saw them, she started yelling at Toledo. However, investigators later confirmed this story was evidence, showed that only Toledo and Yenia were in the house at some point during the night. Toledo slammed his hand into her throat with such force that he shattered her windpipe, killing her. He claimed she attacked him first, and even showed scratch marks on his back, but these were never presented as evidence, suggesting he made the story up. The fight was so loud, it woke the children. Tia and Michael, they rushed out of their room and saw their mother lying dead on the floor. What happened next is also disputed. Claimed that Taishan was present and that he told him to take the kids to the bathroom so they wouldn't see their mother's body. He said he later heard the children screaming, and when he opened the bathroom door, he found Taishan standing over there. Dead bodies, with a bloody axe, but crime scene evidence proved this was another lie. Forensic analysts found almost no blood spatter on the walls, just a few small drops. If an axe had been used, there would have been blood sprayed everywhere instead. The pattern showed a blunt object had been used, which revealed just how brutally Toledo had killed the children himself. After investigators uncovered the damning evidence and Toledo's own partial confession, the case against him became overwhelming. On the morning of October 23rd, when Yenia's mother noticed her daughter hadn't made her usual call, her maternal instincts told her something was horribly wrong. She phoned repeatedly, but there was no answer. Alarmed, she contacted police and drove to the house, arriving just as deputies did. Toledo also pulled up at the same time, appearing unusually calm when questioned. He claimed that Yenia had left the night before with the children, but police suspicion grew quickly inside. Officers were struck by the overpowering smell of cleaning chemicals, and they soon discovered blood traces in the bathroom. At this point, Toledo was taken into custody on the unrelated assault from the day before. While police treated the case as a possible missing persons incident, things escalated when Toledo's neighbor, Taishan Jackson, voluntarily came forward. He explained that around 6 a.m., Toledo called asking him to help move car. Toledo had driven her vehicle to another location while Taishan followed behind. Taishan said he saw Toledo wipe the car down and then dump cleaning supplies and a trunk mat into a nearby dumpster. When police checked that dumpster, they found boots wrapped in the mat, stained with blood, evidence indicating that Toledo had likely stomped or kicked his victims to death. When Confronted with this evidence, Toledo broke down, sobbing and admitting that he had crushed his wife's windpipe, but he still tried to pin the children's deaths on Tatian. Describing a supposed axe attack, investigators found this impossible. The lack of blood spatter and the nature of the wounds suggested a blunt force attack, not an axe during his interrogation. Toledo repeatedly asked to use the bathroom, claiming stomach issues once inside. He smashed a mirror and used a shard to slash his own arms in a failed suicide attempt. An act that spoke volumes about his guilt. Officers intervened, saved him, and continued the case against him ultimately. Prosecutors charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the children, 1 count of second-degree murder for Ian, and 1 count of tampering with evidence, given his past ties to the Latin kings. Authorities believed he had the knowledge to attempt covering up the crime. The trial was harrowing. Witnesses including Kevin Dredden and Tatian testified. Kevin described the violent office assault, while Tatian tearfully denied any role in the murders, saying he liked the kids and would never harm them. The strongest blow to the defense was Toledo's own confession, which the court allowed despite attempts to suppress it. In October 2017, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Michael, guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Elijah, guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Yinya, guilty of tampering with physical evidence, though 10 jurors voted for the death penalty. Florida law required a unanimous decision, so Toledo narrowly avoided execution. The judge, noting his utter lack of remorse, sentenced him to 3 consecutive life sentences, with no chance of release even today. More than a decade later, Yenia's mother, Felicita, continues to honor the memory of her daughter and grandchildren. She has become an outspoken advocate against domestic violence, determined that their loss will serve as a warning and that no one else will suffer at Toledo's hands. The jurors were asked if they believed Toledo felt remorse. By a unanimous vote of 12-0, they answered, "Number." He showed not even a shred of regret for ending the lives of the woman who loved him and the innocent children who trusted him. The 2 jurors who voted to spare your life said they found no trace of remorse in your words or actions. I completely agree with their assessment. I do not believe you are remorseful, and because of that, you will receive no mercy from this court. However, the bodies of Yenia Suarez and her children, Tia and Otto, have never been found to this very day. Story 4 breaking news now, at 5 o'clock, out of Rockford. 4 people are dead and 5 others are injured, following a brutal stabbing attack this afternoon. Police say they have a man in custody. They say young minds are often full of potential. Sometimes they can also be full of chaos. In the city of Rockford, 22-year-old Christian Ivan Sadto turned an ordinary day into a nightmare. What began as a casual visit to a friend's house spiraled into a horrific killing started on March 27, 2024. Christian went to visit his childhood friend, Jacob Shabak, at his home, planning to hang out and smoke together as they had done countless times before. It was a familiar routine, but on that day, something went horribly wrong. What exactly happened during that visit remains unclear. Sadto would later claim that the joint they smoked had been laced with an unknown narcotic, and insisted Jacob was the one who spiked it. According to Sadto, paranoia suddenly took over, and his mind unraveled, convinced Jacob had betrayed him. He snapped in a fit of panic and confusion. Sadto grabbed the kitchen knife and fatally stabbed Jacob. The scene was horrific, but he didn't stop there. Jacob's mother, 63-year-old Ramona, also became a victim. Sadto fatally stabbed her before chasing the wounded Jacob outside as he desperately tried to flee. Witnesses reported seeing Jacob running across the street while Sadto pursued him, wielding a black object. They watched in horror as Sadto tackled Jacob to the ground and stabbed him again. Then, Sadto jumped into his black Chevy Silverado, parked in the driveway at 2316 Home Street. In an appalling act of brutality, he ran Jacob over. Despite the impact, Jacob somehow got back up and staggered into his house. Clinging to life, Sato followed him inside and stabbed him repeatedly until he died. Jacob was only 23, with his whole life ahead of him after leaving the Shabak home. Sato's rampage continued. He drove to the 2200 block of Wada Lane, where he encountered Jay Larson, a longtime mail carrier with 25 years on the job. A nearby witness at 2217. Wada Lane heard the commotion and looked outside to see Sato attacking Larson. The witness saw Sato punching the mailman while he lay on the grass. Helpless as the witness opened his door, Larson screamed for help, begging someone to call the police. While the witness dialed 911, Sato returned to his truck, grabbed a knife with a bright orange handle, and came back to stab Larson multiple times. Then, in another horrifying act, Sato got into his truck and ran over Larson. The force was so great it smashed into a parked car. Still not satisfied, Sato reversed and ran over Larson again before speeding off. The witness later identified Sato from a photo lineup at the Rockford Police Department, and the violence didn't end there. While police were still processing the scene on Wada Lane, more 911 calls came in, this time from 4803 Cleveland Avenue. There, Darlene, her son Jacob, and her daughter Kathy reported that Sato had stormed into their home wielding a Ketano-style knife. Darlene said she had just opened the door to let their dog outside when Sato suddenly appeared and slashed her across the left side of her face near her eye. He then forced his way inside and attacked without warning. Kathy was stabbed in the lower left side of her chin, leaving her in excruciating pain. Jacob suffered deep cuts across his forehead and inside his left ear. He wasn't sure if they were from the knife or Sato's punches. In desperation, Jacob grabbed a syrup bottle and struck Sato, which startled him enough to flee the house. All three victims were rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, their injuries, though serious, weren't life-threatening, and they were later released. When questioned by police, Sato admitted attacking the family and even mentioned that their pit bull had bitten his leg during the assault. After fleeing Darlene's home on foot, Sato continued his rampage. Police were then alerted to another incident at 4715 Cleveland Avenue. There, officers discovered two badly injured teenage girls referred to as Sheila and Kia for privacy, and the body of a deceased girl named Jenna found in the basement. Jenna had suffered severe trauma and was pronounced dead at the scene. Sheila was rushed to the hospital with a serious fracture, multiple head lacerations, and extensive bruising on her left torso. Kia had deep bruises on her left shoulder, arm, and leg. The brutality and relentlessness of Sato's attacks left the community in shock and grief. Detectives later spoke with Kia, who had been staying the night at her friend Jenna's house. The two girls had been relaxing in the basement, watching a movie on a laptop in Jenna's cozy bedroom. Meanwhile, Jenna's sister Sheila was upstairs when she suddenly rushed down to warn them someone had broken into the house before they could react. The intruder charged down after her. He was drenched in blood and wielding one of Jenna's own softball bats, according to Kia. He burst into the room screaming, demanding to know where the gun was. Terrified, the girls tried to hide in the corner of the room, but the man didn't hesitate. He swung the bat wildly. Kia, curled up on the floor in a fetal position, was struck hard on her left side. Jenna was also hit several times before collapsing to the floor, unconscious from the brutal blows. Then, as quickly as it began, the attack stopped. The man fled the basement, leaving behind a scene of chaos and horror. Still in shock, Kia ran outside and flagged down officers who had just arrived. She described the intruder as a man in his mid-20s, with tan skin, black bowl-cut hair, wearing a beige hoodie and blue jeans. He was around 5 feet tall, thin, and completely covered in blood. When she first saw him, detectives then spoke with Sheila, who gave a chilling account of what happened upstairs. She had been in the kitchen, preparing a snack when the man entered through an unlocked rear door. He grabbed a softball bat and wandered through the first floor before Sheila realized the danger and ran to warn the others. As she reached the basement, the intruder followed close behind, Swinging the bat with reckless force, Jenna took the brunt of the blows and soon lost consciousness. The attacker then declared, "I'm going to get a gun," and ran back upstairs, terrified. The girls stayed hidden while they heard him rummaging around above them in the midst of the chaos. Kia managed to call 911 with trembling hands. Jenna and Sheila's mother revealed a heartbreaking truth. Jenna had shielded her sister during the attack. Trying to protect her, Jenna had been just about to turn 16 at a time, when she should have been looking forward to her future, not losing her life in such a horrific way after the bloody scene at Jenna's house. Sato's rampage continued. He smashed a window at a home on the 4600 block of Florence Street and climbed inside with a knife there. He attacked a woman, who managed to escape and run down the street to the 2100 block of Eggleston Road. Sato chased after her relentlessly. A man driving a gray Jeep stopped to help her, but Sato turned on him too, stabbing him multiple times. It was around 1:35 p.m. when police finally caught up with him in a dramatic moment. Sato, exhausted, covered in blood, and wielding a knife, dropped the weapon at the woman's feet just as officers surrounded him. The woman's injuries were so severe, she had to be intubated to breathe. The man who tried to help her was also badly hurt. Sato was wearing the same gray sweatshirt and blue jeans from earlier. His hands had minor cuts, so he was briefly taken to the hospital before being released to police custody. After being read his Miranda rights, Sato confessed to stabbing the mailman earlier in the day. He said he had fled that scene when he saw police and ended up at a house with a motorcycle in the garage. That house, at 4715 Cleveland Avenue, had an unlocked back door inside. He found a bat in the kitchen and used it to attack the 3 kids. He found in the basement. The blood-stained bat was later recovered from an upstairs bedroom. This evidence now forms part of the city's complaint against him at this point. It's painfully clear this was not just an act of violence, it was a full-scale massacre. 4 people were killed, and 7 others were injured. The scale and brutality of the attack shocked the entire city, adding to the unease is that Sato wasn't a complete stranger to local authorities. He lived on Upland Drive, not far from the crime scenes. His record included a 2020 felony arrest for damaging property at a forest preserve, plus some minor traffic offenses, but nothing in his past hinted at this level of carnage. Investigators were stunned by the sudden and extreme shift in his behavior. If Sato faced personal struggles, nothing could possibly justify the devastation he unleashed on innocent lives, despite limited information online about him. One Facebook post shed light on his background. A man named Vincent Cruz, who went to Rockford East High School with Sato and later Rock Valley College, said he was stunned by the news at the time of the killings. Sato worked at a Hollister clothing store, Cruz wrote. "I literally went to school with this guy. Like, what the heck? How could you do that? Someone who was so nice. Jacob, aka Baka, wouldn't hurt a fly, and you do this to him. It's wild. I just don't get this world. Rest in peace, Baka. We will never forget you." My guy, meanwhile, remember how Sato claimed Jacob had laced their joint with something? Well, initial urine tests came back negative. No drugs or foreign substances were found in Jacob's system, and according to doctors, Sato is mentally fit to stand trial. He now faces a long list of charges: 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of home invasion. Each murder and attempted murder charge could bring up to 60 years in prison. Each home invasion charge could add up to 30 years, and because one victim was a postal worker, federal charges could also be filed, potentially increasing his sentence even more. The punishment, many hope, will match the suffering he caused. The courtroom drama escalated further on April 2nd, when Sato made headlines again for a shocking outburst during a hearing, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit and restraints. Standing beside his public defender, he suddenly shouted, "Only God can judge me. You're all puppets and serpents." He aimed his rage directly at Judge Scott Paganini, shouting multiple times, "You're a puppet. You're from the devil. Only God can judge me." The case has shaken Rockford to its core and sparked outrage, grief, and disbelief. Mayor Tom McNamara has urged the community to heal together. He shared a message from Jenna's grieving mother. Jenna died saving her sister and her friend, protecting them from harm. Jay Larson, the beloved postal worker, killed during the rampage, has also been mourned deeply. Ruth Mendoza, an inspector with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, praised Larson's decades of dedication, saying, "Jay was doing what he loved, delivering mail to the customers he had served for 25 years. His loss has left a hole in the community he served so faithfully." Biden has also spoken out about the tragedy, voicing his deep shock and sympathy in an official statement from the White House. He offered prayers for the victims, families, and wished a swift recovery to those who were injured. He also praised the swift response of local law enforcement, saying, "We are grateful for the heroic actions of local law enforcement who confronted the suspect and prevented the loss of more innocent lives." Biden noted how heartbreaking this tragedy is for the Rockford community, especially coming so soon after another violent incident just days earlier. Rockford had been shaken by a deadly knife attack at a Walmart, where an 18-year-old employee lost his life. A 28-year-old local man named Timothy Carter has been charged with first-degree murder in that case. Sadly, this surge in violence isn't isolated in recent months. The U.S. has seen several deeply troubling incidents involving young people. One especially shocking case took place at Palachi High School in Georgia, where 14-year-old Colt Gray was charged with killing 4 people because of the gravity of the crime. He's being tried as an adult. In another tragic case, a 15-year-old carried out a mass shooting in Raleigh, North Carolina, killing 5 people, including an off-duty police officer. Communities are still reeling from these horrific events, which highlight the urgent need for comprehensive strategies to prevent youth violence. If you ever feel overwhelmed or unsafe, it's important to remember, turning to drugs or harmful coping methods will only make things worse. Instead, seek out healthy ways to cope and reach out for support. There are people and resources ready to help you. Don't have to go through difficult times alone. Story 5. This next story is a chilling and tragic reminder of how dangerous unchecked obsession can become in psychology. There's a term known as Adele syndrome, a condition where someone develops an intense, uncontrollable obsession with another person. It's named after Adele Hugo, the youngest daughter of famed French writer Victor Hugo. Adele was celebrated for her beauty and talent as a pianist, but her life took a devastating turn when she fell in love with a man who didn't return her feelings. Her unrequited love consumed her. She began following the man everywhere, pretending to be his wife, and even interfering with his career. This obsession destroyed both her life and his, and eventually she was placed in a psychiatric hospital, where she spent 43 of her 84 years. Adele syndrome can range from harmless infatuation to a dangerous obsession that takes over someone's entire life. While many can recover with therapy, the most severe cases sometimes require hospitalization or intensive treatment, and in rare, extreme instances, obsession can drive people to commit horrific acts. One tragic modern example is the case of Zelia, a 29-year-old woman from Russia who went by the nickname Zale. Zale had traveled to the island of Mauritius, a tropical paradise about 700 miles east of Madagascar, for vacation. She was known for her outgoing nature and worked as a university teacher, often sharing her adventures online. August 12, 2024. She posted a vibrant photo of herself dressed in an Indian outfit at a wedding in Mauritius, captioning it, "I became a guest at an Indian wedding in Mauritius. Turned into an Indian girl. Rate the shot from 1 to 10. No one knew this would be her last post. Just days later, on August 17th, Zale was last seen wearing a white and blue dress and getting into a blue Toyota driven by a local man when she didn't return to her rental apartment. Her travel companion quickly reported her missing around the same time. Her family began receiving strange text messages from her phone, claiming she had chosen to disappear and wanted no further contact. This was completely out of character for Zale, who was always open about her life and stayed in close touch with family. The sudden silence and bizarre messages alarmed her loved ones, who immediately contacted police. Investigation soon focused on her Tinder data, 29-year-old local IT engineer named Puria Vuring Sunder. It's unclear if they had connected before her trip or only after she arrived, but what's certain is that they met up while she was on the island. What seemed like a promising holiday encounter would soon spiral into a nightmare there. Relationships seemed to be more than just a casual fling at first. Investigators viewed Sunder merely as a potential witness, with no indication that he was involved in anything sinister, but everything changed when the case took a dark and shocking turn. Sunder suddenly confessed to the crime as detectives pressed further. They uncovered a critical piece of evidence: traces of blood inside Sunder's car. This discovery raised immediate red flags and intensified suspicion against him eventually. Under mounting pressure, Sunder led police to a remote area called Lam, about a 25-minute drive from where Zale and her friend had been staying there, in a shallow grave. Authorities found Zale's body, and the scene was horrifying. She had been buried without clothes and had suffered multiple stab wounds, concentrated mostly around her chest and breasts, making it clear this was a targeted and deliberate attack. But the nightmare didn't end there. In his confession, Sunder revealed chilling details. He admitted not only to murdering Zale, but also to mutilating her body. He had cut out her tongue and part of her throat, allegedly to stop her from screaming. What makes this even more horrifying is the possibility that Zale might still have been alive when he carried out these acts. This brutal killing occurred on August 22nd, just 5 days after Zale went missing. Sunder later claimed his motive was jealousy. According to him, he believed Zale had been unfaithful and that she had shattered his dream of marrying her and building a life together. Feeling betrayed, he plotted what he called revenge. He lured her out on what she thought would be a simple sightseeing trip. But instead of a peaceful day, she was met with a nightmare. Sunder attacked her with a knife, taking her life in a violent and senseless way, despite his claims of heartbreak. His actions were not those of a man driven by love. They were the calculated actions of someone deeply disturbed and extremely dangerous. Media later reported that detectives were still searching for Zale's missing body parts and clothing, although her remains were incomplete. Her loved ones held a funeral ceremony to honor her memory and begin finding closure before her remains could be returned to Russian investigators believe. Sunder may have planned to dismember her body entirely, but something went wrong, forcing him to hastily bury her in a shallow grave. Those bizarre messages her family received after she disappeared were likely sent by Sunder, possibly using translation apps to make it seem as if they were from Zale herself. His attempt to cover his tracks failed, and the crime scene told the true story of what had happened. Authorities are still searching for the missing pieces and more evidence to fully understand the extent of Sunder's horrifying intentions. For now, he remains in custody as the investigation continues, and many hope he will face the full weight of justice for the brutal murder of Zale to help make sense of this tragedy. Retired police commander and host of the Profiling Evil podcast, Mike King, offered insight. He emphasized that, while we may never fully understand Sunder's twisted mindset, there are warning signs that can help prevent similar tragedies from a criminologist's perspective. King noted that this isn't about victim blaming, it's about risk reduction. Meeting people online can carry hidden dangers. Virtual interactions often create a false sense of security, but meeting someone in real life is a completely different situation. In Zale's case, she likely saw Sunder as just another friendly face during her vacation. King stressed the importance of taking safety precautions when meeting new people, especially while traveling. Being far from home adds extra risk because you're unfamiliar with this culture and people. He recommends always being hyper-aware of your environment, sharing your location with a trusted person, using a buddy system, and having an emergency plan if you get separated. Even something as simple as a phone app tracking your location could make a crucial difference. King also advises travelers to do their research beforehand, as he explained, whenever he and his travel companions explore new places. They all share their phone locations with each other if they decide to split up for the day. They always communicate where they're going and when they plan to return, a small step that can potentially save lives. You have this sense of security when you can simply check an app and confirm your loved ones are where they said they'd be, and if something does go wrong, you at least have a breadcrumb trail to follow, something that could have potentially led to Zale's discovery much sooner if you ever find yourself in a dangerous situation. The worst position to be in is feeling helpless, unable to communicate, or not knowing who to reach out to for help in such circumstances. Contacting your country's embassy or State Department should be your first step. They can provide vital support, including translation services and investigative assistance. Having that kind of backup becomes invaluable when you're in a foreign country far from home. But King didn't stop there. He also explored the suspect's motives, offering chilling insights. His expertise comes from decades of dealing with predatory behavior, giving him an unusually deep understanding of the minds of people, like Sunder for instance. Sunder's claim that he cut out Zale's tongue to keep her from screaming was quickly dismissed by King as implausible. The tongue doesn't produce screams, he explained. Screams come from the lungs and vocal cords. She still would have been able to make sounds of pain, so why would Sunder remove her tongue? King suggested a far darker explanation historically. Cutting out a tongue has been used as punishment for betrayal to Sunder. Zale's alleged affair may have felt like the ultimate betrayal, and this could have driven him to act out in a symbolic, punishing way. This act wasn't about silencing her, it was about hurting her in the most brutal and personal way possible beyond the historical symbolism. King raised another deeply unsettling possibility, that Sunder had long fantasized about such violence. Many predators, he explained, spend years nurturing dark fantasies before they eventually act on them. In Sunder's case, mutilating Zale may have been part of a violent fantasy he had carried for years. This kind of predatory behavior, King warned, often spirals until it erupts in real-world crimes. King also noted the way Zale's body was found reveals crucial clues about the killer's mindset. She was stripped of her clothing and buried in a shallow grave. Behavior King described as indicative of a disorganized predator driven by sexual fantasy. Her body had been left posed and exposed. It would have signaled a deliberate message from the killer, but burying her shows panic or lack of planning. The location itself, close to a residential area rather than somewhere isolated, further suggests disorganization. Investigators are also searching for her missing clothes, not only as evidence, but to better understand the sequence of events. Were they removed as part of a ritual or symbolic act? How a predator treats clothing can reveal a lot about their mindset. King then questioned Sunder's supposed motive. Could someone truly become so violently enraged over what was only a brief vacation romance? They had barely known each other, and he knew she was leaving for Madagascar on September 1st. This raises doubts that jealousy was the only motive. It's possible, King suggested, that Sunder was looking for someone to target, and that Zale simply crossed his path at the wrong time. This theory has led some to wonder if investigators should revisit other unsolved crimes on the island to see if Sunder could be linked to them. Sadly, Zale's case is not the only example of how dangerous meeting strangers online can be. In 2016, Ingrid Line, a nurse and mother of 3 from Seattle, was murdered and dismembered by John Robert Charlton, a man she met on an online dating site in 2017. 24-year-old Sydney Loof from Nebraska went on a date with Bailey Boswell and her boyfriend Aubrey Trail. What seemed like an innocent meeting ended in horror when they strangled and dismembered her the following year. 22-year-old Grace Millen from the UK matched with Jesse Shane Kempson on Tinder while traveling in New Zealand. Tragically, she was murdered just before her birthday, and the very next day, Kempson was back on Tinder while her body lay hidden in a suitcase that same year. Daniel Drayton was charged with the murder of Samantha Stewart, a nurse from Queens, whom he also met through a dating app. He left her naked, wrapped in a blanket, with her teeth knocked out later. It was revealed that Drayton was a serial killer who used dating apps to hunt for victims. These tragic stories are haunting reminders of the risks involved. If you ever go on a date with someone you've only just met online, tell a friend where you're going, and if they make you feel uneasy, don't hesitate to leave. Zal and these other victims were simply seeking companionship or a long-term relationship, like so many people do. They couldn't have known they were meeting people who were cruel and dangerous, and if you ever have to choose between taking a chance on someone you don't know well or protecting yourself, always choose safety. Sometimes it's better to walk away from the unknown than to risk becoming another tragedy. 6 Forsyth County, 911. Hi. Yes, I need an ambulance, okay? Have you checked if she's breathing? She's not moving one bit. She's not breathing. The woman mentioned in this 911 call was Tamla Hoare, a 40-year-old mother of 5. Forsyth County, Georgia, is a place long haunted by its racist history. So when Tamla, the only black woman at an otherwise all-white adult sleepover, was found dead, the strange inconsistencies in her case would soon confuse and divide the entire nation. The deceased woman mentioned in this 911 call is Tamla Hoare, a 40-year-old mother of 5. Forsyth County, Georgia, is a place haunted by its deeply racist past. So when Tamla, the only black woman at an all-white adult sleepover, was found dead, the troubling inconsistencies surrounding her case shocked and confused the entire nation. Had been invited to a birthday party hosted by her friend, Jean Myers, on November 3, 2018. It was supposed to be a fun night, a cozy gathering of moms enjoying drinks, playing games, and unwinding from their busy lives. Tamla had brought a bottle of tequila as her contribution, and throughout the evening, she was seen laughing, chatting, and watching football with the others. There were about a dozen people at the party, including Jean's boyfriend and a few of the husbands who joined later. Everyone described the mood as light-hearted and relaxed. Sometime after midnight, guests began leaving, but Tamla decided to stay the night rather than drive home. She had planned ahead, even bringing her pajamas and letting her husband know she wouldn't be coming back that evening by 1:30 a.m. Most guests had gone to bed. The last confirmed sighting of Tamla was from a security system that captured her walking out onto the backyard deck around 1:50 a.m. holding a cigarette. That would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The next morning, around 8:45 a.m., one of the partygoers looked out the window and saw a horrifying sight. Tamla's body was lying face down in the grass below the deck. She wasn't moving. Paramedics were called, but it was already too late. Authorities quickly ruled her death an accident, claiming she had fallen from the deck while intoxicated. They cited high levels of alcohol in her system and minor traces of THC and Xanax, but Tamla's family and friends were immediately skeptical. The injuries on her body, including cuts on her face, abrasions on her wrists and hands, and a dislocated wrist, didn't fully align with a simple fall. Even more suspicious was the lack of grass or dirt on her feet. Despite being barefoot then, there were the odd behaviors from those at the party. None of them could explain how they didn't hear or notice anything during the night. The homeowner's security system, which could have provided crucial clues, had been turned off around the time of her last sighting, and the scene itself raised questions. Tamla's body had been moved before the police arrived, violating protocol and potentially disturbing key evidence. Official autopsy report listed the cause of death as multiple blunt force trauma from a fall, but a second independent autopsy, requested by her family, suggested possible signs of foul play that had been overlooked. This only deepened the suspicion surrounding the case for many. Tamla's death felt like more than just a tragic accident. It felt like a cover-up. Her case became a lightning rod for discussions about race, privilege, and justice. Especially in a county with such a fraught history, online communities rallied for answers, pushing for a reopening of the case, using the hashtag #JusticeForTamLA. Despite this pressure, authorities closed the investigation in 2019, stating they found no evidence of foul play, but many remain unconvinced, believing that the truth about what really happened to Tamla that night has yet to come to light. Her story continues to serve as a grim reminder that not all tragedies are as clear-cut as they seem, and that sometimes the loudest thing in a case is the silence left behind. Story 7, please. Somebody help me. I can't find my daughter. She's gone. These were the frantic words heard in a 911 call made by a mother in Calumet City, Illinois. On April 15, 2022, the caller was desperately searching for her 3-year-old daughter. Nilo Latimore's story is one that gripped the nation with both heartbreak and outrage. She had been staying with her mother, 29-year-old Nitisha Lattimore, when tragedy struck, according to investigators. Nitisha had been in an on-and-off relationship with a man named Decian Brown. Their relationship had been rocky, filled with tension and fights. But no one could have predicted the horror that was about to unfold. On December 5, 2020, police believe Decian Brown ambushed and murdered Nitisha in her apartment. Detectives say he stabbed her repeatedly, leaving her to die on the floor. The motive? Authorities suspect he was furious after learning Nitisha had miscarried a baby that he believed was his, but the nightmare didn't end there. After killing Nitisha, Brown allegedly stayed in the apartment with her lifeless body for several days, while little Nilo was still there. Detectives believe that at some point during those days, Brown also killed Nilo. Then, he allegedly placed Nilo's body inside a stroller and threw him into the Ohio River from a bridge. Police eventually caught up with Brown. He was arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder for both Nitisha and Nilo. While Nitisha's body was found in a suitcase near a bridge, Nilo's body has never been recovered, despite extensive searches along the river. The chilling details left investigators and the public horrified. Security footage even showed Brown riding a city bus with Nitisha's body in the suitcase, calmly going about his day as if nothing had happened. Prosecutors described the crime as one of the most disturbing and heartless cases they had ever seen. During court proceedings, it was revealed that Brown had allegedly planned the murders for weeks. Prosecutors believe he wanted to punish Nitisha for losing the baby he thought was his, and in doing so, cruelly took the life of an innocent child who had nothing to do with his anger. Nitisha's family has spoken out, remembering her as a loving, bright, and hard-working young woman who adored her son more than anything. They continue to fight for justice on behalf of both Nitisha and Nilo, even as the pain of not being able to lay Nilo to rest still lingers. This case stands as a haunting reminder of how domestic violence can spiral into unimaginable tragedy, and how children often become the silent victims caught in the crossfire. Story 8. What's your emergency? My friend, she's not breathing. Please hurry. This panicked call came from a group of friends vacationing together in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, on October 29, 2022. The woman they were desperately trying to save was 25-year-old Shanquella Robinson from Charlotte, North Carolina. Tranquil had traveled to Mexico with 6 people she considered close friends to celebrate a birthday. They had rented a luxury villa and planned a weekend full of fun and relaxation. But less than 24 hours after they arrived, tragedy struck. According to her friends, Shanquella had suddenly become ill from alcohol poisoning and was found unresponsive. That was the story they told her family when they called to say she had passed away. However, when Shanquella's devastated parents received her autopsy report, it revealed something shocking. Her cause of death was listed as a severe spinal cord injury and a broken neck. This finding completely contradicted the group's claim that she had died from alcohol poisoning. Even more disturbing, not long after her death, a video began circulating online showing Shanquella being brutally beaten inside the villa by one of the women on the trip. While others stood around recording and encouraging the attack, the video sparked international outrage. People all over the world demanded justice for Shankwella. The Mexican authorities soon launched a homicide investigation, and the case caught the attention of the FBI. It was revealed that none of the friends stayed behind in Mexico to speak with police. They all left the country, leaving Shankwella's body behind. Shankwella's family was heartbroken and furious. They described her as a bright, loving, and driven young woman who ran her own hair braiding business and had her whole future ahead of her. They couldn't understand why people she trusted would betray her in such a horrifying way. Mexican prosecutors eventually issued an arrest warrant for the woman seen assaulting Shankwella in the video, labeling the crime as femicide. However, as of now, the suspect has not been extradited from the United States to face charges in Mexico. The FBI continues its own investigation, but no arrests have been made. Shankwella's death has become a symbol of the importance of knowing who you can truly trust, especially when traveling far from home. Her parents continue to fight for justice, vowing they will not rest until those responsible are held accountable. Was supposed to be a weekend getaway with friends, turned into a chilling nightmare, one that Shankwella's family and the world will never forget. Story 9. Ma'am, we found a body. Those chilling words came from a police officer in Sugar Land, Texas, on April 16, 2016. The body was that of 19-year-old college student Karen Perez. Karen had gone missing the night before, after attending a small gathering with friends. She was described as bright, sweet, and ambitious, someone who loved art and had dreams of becoming a veterinarian when she didn't return home. Her worried father began calling her phone over and over, but there was no answer. The following day, authorities discovered Karen's body stuffed inside an abandoned apartment building. The scene was horrifying. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. What made the case even more shocking was how the police figured out who had killed her. Investigators learned that Karen's boyfriend, a teenage boy from her school, had recorded the murder on his phone. The audio captured Karen begging him to let her go and saying, "I don't want to die." He ignored her pleas and continued the attack, while others watched silently in the background. That recording became the most crucial piece of evidence in the case. The boyfriend was arrested and later convicted of capital murder, receiving a life sentence. Karen's death devastated her family, friends, and community. She had her entire life ahead of her, and it was stolen in the most brutal way imaginable. The case also sparked outrage across Texas, raising awareness about teen dating violence and the dangers of bystander silence, people who knew what was happening but did nothing to stop it. Karen's story is a heartbreaking reminder that abuse can happen at any age, and that speaking up when something seems wrong could save a life. Corruption, cover-ups, contradicting stories, and evidence that was seemingly ignored, even today. Tama's grieving family is still searching for answers. Was her death a tragic accident or something far more sinister? This case is a mystery that refuses to be buried, and it continues to capture the attention of people all over the world. Before diving in, a quick note from today's sponsor, Aura, may have stolen the social security numbers of nearly every American. Over 29 billion personal records were reportedly taken from National Public Data, a company that provides background check information to employers, private investigators, and staffing agencies. These leaked records include full names, addresses, birth dates, social security numbers, and phone numbers, even alternate names, and according to reports, the hacker group responsible has made this sensitive data publicly available online. If you weren't taking online precautions before, this should be your wake-up call right now. Your personal data is more vulnerable than ever. I use Aura because it alerts me immediately if my phone number, email, or social security number shows up on the dark web. It warns me if anyone tries to use my identity to access my credit or bank accounts, and if the worst happens, Aura provides up to $5 million in identity theft insurance. They offer multiple protective features, all inside one easy-to-use app. You can visit Auracom Into the Deep to try Aura free for 14 days. Plenty of time to check if your personal data has been exposed, because let's be honest, national public data probably won't face any consequences for this breach, and they definitely won't be the ones protecting you. Don't leave yourself or your family vulnerable to cybercrime. Head to Auracom Into the Deep and start your free 2-week trial now. Let's get back to Thoma's story. Tamla Tam George Horsford was born on October 10, 1978, in Kingstown, St. Vincent and the Grenadines at age 11. She moved with her family to the Bronx, New York. Later, she relocated to Florida, where she met and married Leander Horsford. Leander had a daughter from a previous relationship, and together, he and Tam had 5 more children, all boys. Everyone who knew Tam described her as a devoted mother and loving wife. She was fun, lively, and loved to dance. She was the mom who showed up at her boys' football games with a bullhorn, cheering louder than anyone else. Since 2013, Leander's job led the family to move to Forsyth County, Georgia, a place with a deeply troubled racial history. In 1912, more than 1,000 black residents were violently driven out of Forsyth County. Even today, the county is about 96% white, and some still label it a sundown town, a place where people of color are often made to feel unwelcome. On the evening of November 3, 2018, Tam made dinner for her husband and kids, then left for a birthday party hosted by her new friend, Jean Myers. Jean had invited several other moms from the local youth football league. The plan was for everyone to drink, celebrate, and spend the night, so no one had to drive home. Tam didn't know many of the women well, and barely knew Jean, but she didn't want to disappoint her, so she decided to go. She arrived around 8:30 p.m., carrying an overnight bag and a bottle of tequila. As a gift, Jean didn't like tequila, and neither did the others, so Tam ended up drinking it mostly by herself, while the other women had different drinks. Though the party was meant to be all women, Jean's boyfriend Jose Barrera and another guest's husband, Tom Smith, decided to stay while the women hung out upstairs watching the LSU-Alabama game. Jose and Tom watched football in the basement. There were 9 women and 2 men total at the party, and 8 of them planned to spend the night. Tam was the only smoker, so she stepped outside frequently for cigarettes, and also smoked a bit of marijuana. Jean jokingly called her a female Bob Marley and warned her that Jose worked for the court system and didn't like marijuana. Used to women left at 10:30 p.m. because they didn't have babysitters around midnight. The rest played Cards Against Humanity for about an hour, then started cleaning up and getting ready for bed. Tam called her husband and her older daughter around this time. Her last call to them. She briefly considered driving home, thinking she hadn't had much to drink, but the others convinced her to stay. By about 1:30 a.m., most people had gone to bed. Jean and Jose went to bed as well, leaving Tam in the kitchen eating a bowl of gumbo. She told them she'd have one last cigarette on the back porch the next morning. Jean's Aunt Mylene Lombardi, who lived in the house, was making coffee when she looked out into the backyard and froze. Tam was lying face down in the grass under the deck instead of immediately calling for help. Mylene went upstairs to get Jean and Jose, but first she prayed beside Tam's body at 8:59 a.m. Someone finally called 911. "Okay, what's going on?" "We had people over last night. We were drinking. Most of us went to bed. One of them stayed on the balcony. She was drinking, and we just went outside, and she's laying face down in the backyard." Many people have noted how calm the caller sounds during the 911 call. Jose tells the operator he sees a small cut on Tam's wrist, adding, "I don't know if she did this to herself or if someone else did it. I'm completely not sure. And that's the only blood you see. That's what I can see without moving her over. I haven't seen her face." The operator then asks if Tam was known to be suicidal. "I honestly have no idea. I've only met her once before, Like my girlfriend said, people were here last night. It was her birthday party. The woman we believe is deceased was just another guest. Instead of everyone going out, my girlfriend invited people to stay over. She was the last person I saw awake after everyone had gone to bed. She was in the kitchen, either waiting for a ride or planning to wait until morning. Okay, how far is the drop from where she might have fallen? From the deck to the ground is about 20 feet. Maybe more from where your feet would stand to the railing. Is around 3.5 to 4 feet. Arrived at Jean's house at 9:07 a.m. and confirmed. Tema was already dead. They interviewed everyone who had been at the party, about 30 people in total. The autopsy revealed several unusual injuries that could have come from a fall or blunt impact. It also showed Tema's blood alcohol content was 238, almost 3 times the legal driving limit. Despite this, even before the autopsy results came back, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office had already been leaning toward the idea that her death was just an accident. They believed she might have fallen from the home's second-floor outdoor deck initially. They even told Tama's husband, Leander, that she had tripped on garden edging and hit the ground. Jean's aunt, who lived at the house, said she had tripped on that same edging before because Tama had been drinking and smoking marijuana. Police speculated she could have been dizzy or disoriented, which might have contributed to a fall. They estimated she died around 1:57 a.m., the same time the security system showed the back door opening and never closing again. February 20th, 2019, authorities officially closed the case, ruling it an accident, but there are still many unanswered questions. Officials claimed Tama's injuries didn't appear to be from foul play. They emphasized that people had been drinking and most were asleep by then. Leaving Tama alone on the deck, Leander didn't accept this. He said Tama could drink half a bottle of tequila and still dance in high heels. There was no way she would be so impaired that she simply fell off the deck. About 2 weeks later, another party guest, Stacy Smith, spoke with police. She also doubted the accidental fall theory. Stacy said she had stood on that deck many times and even tried to see if a drunk person could fall by leaning over to pretend to vomit, but couldn't figure out how it would be possible. She also noted Tama hadn't seemed drunk or sick that night. Despite her high blood alcohol level, photos and videos from the party showed Tama happy and smiling initially. Even Jean, the homeowner, publicly said she didn't believe Tama fell from the deck. But that changed after Tama's friend Michelle Graves began speaking out on social media, claiming things weren't adding up and people from the party knew more than they were, saying Michelle told the media, "They're totally lying. They're not off the hook because this was not an accident." Soon after, several partygoers, including Zhang, sued Michelle, saying she defamed them in 13 Facebook posts by implying they were involved in Tama's death or helped cover it up. Michelle argued she only posted information backed by Tama's case filing. Puzzling detail: when Jean and Jose found Tama, they said she was lying face down with her arms by her sides and palms facing up, but when first responders arrived, her position had changed. Her left arm was stretched out and bent at the elbow, with her fist clenched, and her face was flat on the ground. This looked unnatural, almost as if she had fallen straight down. One officer even said, "If you try to catch yourself with your left hand and there's nothing to grab, you'd spin around. This doesn't make sense. Zits, like she fell straight down." There were also several cuts and scrapes on Tama's hands and arms, which some thought could be defensive wounds from a struggle before she fell. Jose told an investigator on November 7th that he had checked Tama for a pulse, which could explain why her arm moved, but later, when questioned by a special agent, he denied ever touching her, calling the earlier claim complete. Jose also mentioned finding an unlit cigarette and a lighter on the deck near where she was found, but because police believed her death was accidental, they never tested these items for fingerprints. They also failed to secure the scene, so critical evidence may have been lost or contaminated. Jose had also said in the 911 call that there were security cameras facing the backyard, but later it was revealed that all the cameras had dead batteries and hadn't recorded anything. Many people found this suspicious, and family questioned why no one attempted CPR on Tama when she was found, not even police in fact. Police told the ambulance not to come, and she was just placed in a body bag and taken away. This lack of urgency led some to wonder if race played a role. Tama was the only black woman at a party full of white women in a county with a documented history of racism. They questioned if the situation would have been treated differently had the roles been reversed. As the case gained national attention, celebrities like 50 Cent and T voiced their belief that Tama's death was not an accident. It wasn't until over 600,000 people signed a petition that Sheriff Freeman finally asked that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation (GBI) reopened Tama's case in July 2020 after public pressure and a petition with over 600,000 signatures. When they reviewed the house's security records, they discovered more door activity than previously reported. The garage door opened at 1:40 a.m. and wasn't closed until morning. The last person who claimed to see Tama alive, Bridget Fuller, said she and Tama walked together to the front door around 1:47 a.m. when Bridget's husband came to pick her up. Bridget said she hugged Tama before leaving, which matched the door chime at 1:47 a.m. But her husband told police he only saw Bridget at the door, not Tama. This contradiction deepened suspicion in December 2018. Jose Barrera, the man who called 911, was fired from his job as a pretrial officer for looking at confidential records about Tama's death and allegedly leaking information. He denied doing anything illegal, saying everything he saw was public. Another strange detail: when Tama's body was autopsied, only 5 photos were taken, far fewer than normal for a suspicious death. Her father believed this showed that investigators were more focused on examining Tama than on finding out if someone hurt her. There were other puzzling questions. How could someone as coordinated as Tama, even with alcohol in her system, fall over a 14-foot railing? Why did no one hear her scream or fall? Why did the back door stay open from 1:57 a.m. until morning? For more than a year, Tama's family fought for the case to be reinvestigated. They didn't believe her death was accidental. They pushed for a second autopsy. And in June 2020, the GBI finally did it. The second autopsy found major injuries: scrapes on her face, bleeding in her skull and brain, a broken neck, a dislocated right wrist, cuts on her arms and legs, and even a tear in her heart. They also found Xanax in her system, which no one could explain. The first autopsy had not reported the Tama's family then hired an independent expert for a third opinion, who said her wrist had a compound fracture. The bone had pierced the skin. This was alarming because there was almost no blood where she was found, making people wonder if the injury happened elsewhere. Also troubling, none of the medical examiners found any major skull fractures or bruising that matched a 14-foot fall. Investigators initially took photos and videos from the partygoers' phones, but they didn't seize the phones or copy all data by the time the GBI reviewed the case. Some people had new phones, and some texts and photos had been deleted. The GBI also uncovered false statements from party guests. Bridget, for example, claimed her anxiety medication made it impossible for her to lie, which isn't medically true. She also claimed she didn't share her Xanax. Yet GBI found messages showing she had given some to others, and possibly to women at the party. She denied giving any to Tama. Though Tama had Xanax in her system, Bridget also didn't seem to like Tama, and it appeared none of the women really did. Meanwhile, one of the original detectives, Michael Christian, left the department after an internal investigation found he broke his oath and neglected his duty to women. Told GBI that Michael had shared confidential case details. One said he gave her Tama's toxicology report and claimed her body had been moved. Another said he even sent her a photo of Tama's body. Michael reportedly obsessed over the case and even had panic attacks about it. His ex-girlfriend said he believed Tama's death was accidental, but didn't believe she fell from the balcony. She also claimed he told her about calls between Jose Barrera and lead investigator Andy Kalin before the 911 call, suggesting a possible cover-up. Jose and Andy denied this. GBI obtained screenshots of disturbing Snapchat messages Michael sent the day Tama was found. He mocked talking to Tama's husband and made insensitive jokes about her death and race, even calling her the porch lady. He later admitted sending the messages, calling them sarcasm and bad taste, and denied sharing crime scene photos. A friend of Tama's husband, Stephen Reynolds, even told investigators he worried the death might have been sexually motivated, claiming two couples at the party were swingers and suggesting someone might have tried something with Tama. However, this theory never appeared in the official investigation. The GBI never conducted interviews with the couples that Stephen had mentioned. Instead, they appeared to focus heavily on Tama's husband, Leander. They went through his phone and social media accounts, but found nothing suspicious. July 28, 2021, the GBI officially closed their investigation. They announced that they would not be filing any criminal charges, which meant Tama's death remains classified as an accident, and no one has ever been arrested or charged. One of the most heartbreaking parts of this case comes from Leander's experience at the funeral home when he went to see Tama's body before the funeral. He was so shocked that he yelled out loudly, startling everyone. He recalled, "When I walked into the funeral home, I probably scared everyone because I yelled, 'What the F******* as loud as I could. I saw my wife looking like she had black shoe polish all over her face. I completely lost it and told them to take it off. They said they had to cover up the bruising, but you don't cover bruises with black shoe polish. My wife is my skin color, but her face was so dark, like blackface.'" Leander said he was furious and even considered closing the casket for the viewing. His sons wanted to see their mother, but he worried how it would affect them. His oldest son insisted, so Leander allowed him to come in. He remembered, "We both just stood there and looked at her. Neither of us cried because it didn't look anything like her." He described how her wrist was bent unnaturally, and you could see where the bone had pierced through the skin. When his son saw her, the boy quietly said, "Dad, that doesn't look like an accident." That moment convinced Leander to keep the casket open, saying, "If a 12-year-old can walk up and say, 'It doesn't look like an accident,' then leave the casket open." Tama Horsford's funeral was held at McDonald and Son Funeral Home in Georgia, on Friday, November 9, 2018. Story 6. By all accounts, Lindsay Musgrove was a kind and caring woman. She graduated from Quinnipiac University in 2012 with a degree in biology, and 2 years later earned her nursing license. She then studied at the Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions and became a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. Lindsay quickly became known as a compassionate caregiver. Loved by her co-workers, her attention to detail and calming presence made her a favorite among patients, who often requested her for future deliveries. In 2016, Lindsay married Patrick Clancy, a computer software engineer. A year later, they welcomed their first child, Cora, who was loving and nurturing and dreamed of becoming both a doctor and a mother someday. In 2019, their second child, Dawson, was born, a bright and charismatic boy with a joyful laugh. In 2022, Lindsay gave birth to their youngest, Ken, a happy and easygoing baby, nicknamed Happy Callan by his parents. The family lived in a beautiful home in Duxbury, Massachusetts, which they purchased for about $500,000. It had a white picket fence and a backyard playground, the perfect picture of an American dream home to everyone around them. Lindsay and Patrick seemed to have a perfect marriage. They rarely argued, exchanged "I love you" several times a day, and radiated warmth and affection. Patrick adored his children, often playing with them in the yard. Lindsay's world revolved around her kids. She believed raising them was the most meaningful thing she could do. Their photos covered the walls of the house, and she frequently posted about them on social media, writing things like, "I feel like the luckiest mama in the world, and so unbelievably thankful for this family and life." Friends described Lindsay as the type of mom who would leave social events early just to be home with her babies. She hated to hear them cry, even during sleep training. However, after having her first 2 children, Lindsay struggled emotionally. Motherhood felt overwhelming, and she had difficulty adjusting still. She later shared on Facebook that her experience after having Ken was going better. She was focusing on exercise, nutrition, and rest to improve her mental health. But as her maternity leave came to an end, she began to feel intense anxiety about going back to work. The pressure of balancing her demanding job and being a full-time mother became too much. She sought help from multiple therapists and psychiatrists and was prescribed various medications. September 2022, her anxiety had escalated to an all-time high. She went for an evaluation at the Women and Infants Center for Women's Behavioral Health in Providence. But surprisingly, she was not diagnosed with postpartum depression during that visit. Then, on January 1st, 2023, Lindsay confessed to Patrick that she was having thoughts of harming herself and their children. Alarmed, Patrick encouraged her to seek help, and she voluntarily admitted herself to McLean Hospital for mental health treatment, where she stayed for 5 days. Doctors eventually discharged her, stating she was not a danger to herself or others. Throughout January, Lindsay seemed to be improving. The family went on several outings to museums and restaurants, and she told relatives she no longer had harmful thoughts. Even her mother said her text messages had become more upbeat, but beneath the surface, Lindsay was still quietly battling her demons. On January 24th, 2023, those inner struggles would finally surface in the most devastating way. The previous day, January 23rd, had seemed completely normal. That morning, Lindsay took the kids to the doctor for routine checkups. Cora had a scheduled pediatric visit. After returning home, Lindsay spent quality after coming back inside from playing in the snow with her children. Lindsay appeared cheerful and content. She even snapped some photos of the kids enjoying themselves and sent them to her husband, Patrick, and her mother, painting the picture of an ordinary, happy winter day. Patrick was working from home in the basement that day. Around 4 p.m., while the kids were warming up, Lindsay began browsing on her phone. She searched for Kids Miralax, then used Apple Maps to check the drive time to the 3 Volts restaurant in Kingston. She also visited the CVS website, even calling the Kingston branch to ask if they had children's Miralax in stock. Shortly after, Lindsay messaged Patrick, "Any chance you want to do takeout from the 3 Volts? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." Although 3V wasn't a usual choice, it was farther than the places they normally ordered from. Patrick agreed. He told her he'd look at the menu, eventually choosing the scallop and pork belly risotto, while Lindsay picked the Mediterranean Power Bowl at 5:10 p.m. She called the restaurant, placed their order, and listed Patrick as the pickup person by 5:15 p.m. Patrick left to collect their dinner. Lindsay texted him a reminder to also pick up the kids' medication at CVS. Security footage shows Patrick arriving at CVS at 5:32 p.m. He called Lindsay to confirm which brand she wanted, but she didn't answer at first. A minute later, she returned his call. They spoke for 14 minutes, and though the conversation seemed normal, Patrick later said it sounded like Lindsay was in the middle of something while talking. He returned home around 6 p.m. with dinner and medication, but as he walked inside, an unsettling silence hit him. Their lively, bustling home was eerily still. Patrick called Lindsay's phone at 6:09 p.m. No answer. He searched the house and, finding nothing, climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. The door was locked. Lindsay never locked their bedroom. His worry turned to panic. He pounded on the door, calling her name. No response. He finally forced the door open. The sight inside was horrific. Blood-streaked the floor and windowsill. A bloody knife rested on Lindsay's bedside table. Patrick's heart pounded as he ran to the window and saw Lindsay lying motionless on the ground. Outside, he called 911. As he bolted downstairs and out to her, Lindsay was lying, face up in the backyard, soaked in blood, with deep slashes on her wrists and neck. She was barely conscious. "What have you done?" Patrick cried in a flat, distant voice. Lindsay replied that she had tried to end her life and had jumped from the window, terrified and confused. Patrick asked the unthinkable, "Where are the kids?" "The basement," she said. Coldly, Patrick stayed with Lindsay until paramedics arrived, remaining on the phone with the 911 dispatcher the entire time after they began treating her. He rushed back inside to find their children. He called out softly, "Guys." As he descended the basement steps, no answer. The air grew heavier with every step. Then came a scream, Patrick's own, echoing through the line to the 911 dispatching. The basement floor lay his 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 7-month-old Ken. Each had an exercise band wrapped tightly around their necks. Patrick begged them to wake up, to breathe, sobbing as he screamed for the officers upstairs to come help. Within minutes, they rushed down and witnessed the devastating scene, and Patrick's voice cracked as he said the words no parent should ever have to say. "She killed the kids." Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead at the scene. Baby Ken was still alive, but gravely injured. He was rushed to the hospital, where he died days later, in Patrick's arms in less than 20 minutes. The life Patrick once knew had been destroyed. Meanwhile, Lindsay was rushed to Boston's Children's Hospital to be treated for her self-inflicted wound, for the injuries she sustained after leaping out of a window and plunging 20 feet in an attempt to take her own life. Lindsay Clancy was soon charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation or suffocation, and 3 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. In the days following this horrific tragedy, her husband, Patrick Clancy, shared an emotional message on a GoFundMe page created to support him and his family, despite his unimaginable grief. Patrick expressed deep love and even forgiveness for Lindsay. He admitted that the pain and shock were relentless and had left him, and his family shattered. The GoFundMe campaign was intended to help cover the funeral costs for their children, Cora, Dawson, and Callum, and it received overwhelming public support. However, some people criticized the campaign, arguing that contributing might indirectly fund Lindsay's legal defense. This sparked public controversy. Lindsay's attorneys quickly clarified that none of the donated money would be used for her defense, which her parents were fully covering despite the backlash. The fundraiser raised over $1 million before it eventually stopped accepting donations after reaching its goal on February 3, 2023. During a brief hearing at Plymouth District Court, Lindsay's attorney requested that police relax security measures at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where Lindsay was recovering. This was to allow a forensic psychiatrist to evaluate her for possible postpartum depression. Her attorneys argued that her self-inflicted injuries left her barely able to move and that she posed no threat to anyone. They further claimed Lindsay had been subjected to a dangerous and overwhelming mix of prescription drugs in just 4 months. She had been prescribed 13 different medications to treat mood disorders, anxiety, and psychosis, including Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, Zoloft, amitriptyline, mirtazapine, Prozac, Lamictal, Seroquel, and Ambien. Her lawyers argued that overmedication could cause suicidal and even homicidal thoughts, making a forensic evaluation essential. The Plymouth County prosecutor countered this narrative, portraying Lindsay as having acted with extreme atrocity and cruelty, rejecting claims that postpartum psychosis and overmedication were to blame. During the hearing, Lindsay sat silently in her hospital room, watching the proceedings via video. A not guilty plea was entered on her behalf. Experts labeled her actions as filicide, the deliberate killing of one's own children. Psychiatrist Dr. Philip Resnick, a leading expert on filicide, has identified 5 primary motives behind such acts: altruistic filicide, A parent believes they are sparing their children from future suffering or harm. Psychotic filicide. A parent experiencing delusions or hallucinations sees their children as threats or believes killing them is a way to save them unwanted child. Filicide. A parent harbors resentment or regret about having a child, which escalates into violence. Fatal child abuse. Filicide. Severe, ongoing abuse that eventually results in the child's death, sometimes giving the parent a twisted sense of relief. Spousal revenge. Filicide. A parent harms their children as a way to punish or control their partner. This tragedy reignited questions about the link between postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and homicidal behavior after childbirth. Hormone levels plummet, causing chemical changes in the brain that can trigger mood swings, exhaustion, anxiety, and intrusive thoughts. While postpartum depression is more common, postpartum psychosis is rare but extremely dangerous, occurring in about 1 to 2 of every 1,000 births, and is marked by hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, rapid mood shifts, and disorganized thinking. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing diary entry from Lindsay's phone dated October 25, 2022, months before the murders. In it, she revealed feelings of frustration and resentment toward her older children, Cora and Dawson. She admitted sometimes resenting them because they took her attention away from their infant brother, Callum. She also wrote that when Cora and Dawson came home from preschool, their negative energies seemed to affect her mood. Lindsay said she felt deeply depressed and feared her emotions were rubbing off on the children. Detectives also learned that just 4 days before the killings, just 4 days before the murders, Lindsay Clancy conducted a troubling search on her phone. Can you treat a sociopath? She also looked up methods of killing. This revelation that Lindsay had harbored resentment toward her children and actively sought information on how to commit such a horrific act deeply disturbed investigators and the public alike. During her arraignment in October 2023, prosecutors presented toxicology reports showing that Lindsay had multiple medications in her system. At the time of the killings, these included antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, and an anticonvulsant, all of which were found to be at therapeutic levels, not toxic or Prosecution argued that these findings supported their belief that Lindsay had premeditated the murders. They claimed the medications did not influence or impair her actions, and that she had already made the conscious decision to kill her children. They asserted that the timing and controlled levels of the drugs only reinforced the theory that she had acted with clarity and intent. Meanwhile, in 2024, Lindsay's husband Patrick Clancy honored the memory of their children by completing the Boston Marathon in their names, raising funds for Boston Children's Hospital. As for Lindsay, she continues to receive treatment at Tewksbury Hospital while awaiting trial for the murders. She is currently described as permanently paralyzed and, now, as the rain softly taps against the window and the night deepens around us, thank you for joining me here at Crime Whisper.